All right. Welcome to our Heading to UW-Madison webinar. We're talking all about how to have a successful freshman year. So real quick, who am I? I am the managing director of State Street Education. We're an executive function coaching company, so we work with high school and college students all around the country. Um, and we are located in Madison, Wisconsin. So specifically, we work with a lot of students at UW-Madison. We know the university pretty well. And we're only a couple miles off of campus. So what I want to talk about today is just how your students can have that successful transition, get off to a good start. What are some of the things to think about? Some of the things I'm going to talk about, I think apply to any big state school. But then we'll get into some Madison specific things as well. Some of the things I'm going to talk about are just general, like how can you transition into college and do well right off the bat. So we're going to kind of hit some broad things. We'll hit some more Madison specific things, and probably if you're sitting down to watch this, I want to warn people it's probably between 20 and 30 minutes. And we'll try to stay on time here. Okay, so if you're listening, I'm assuming your student is probably going to UW-Madison. Here's the school, right? Um, it's this is what it is. It's got a ton to offer, right? It's got the very prestigious academic side, research, tons of opportunity. Um, it's also a big party school with lots of shiny distractions, big time college sports, all the things, not to mention it's in the state's capital. So it's, we're not talking about Chicago or New York here. Madison is a small city, very small city. However, campus is right, it's right off sort of the downtown area where there's a lot going on as well. So, certainly there's a lot to do, a lot to see, and definitely like a transition for students as they're coming here. And really what we're going to talk about today is like, well, how can we figure out how to make it work? Before we jump into these things, though, I do like to point out a couple things here about how college is different from high school and sort of what students can expect, or ultimately, even some red flags to look for. So, um, this is definitely my sort of like, yeah, no kidding page. Um, Students are going to be in class way less, right? They're probably only going to be in class 10 to 15 minutes a week, which means I call them academic tasks. They're going to have a lot more academic tasks. An academic task is anything that's not related to a deadline, a submission, points, none of that. It's just what are learning tasks that I have to do so that I can do well in my college courses. And so when you start to put those, a pretty big stack of academic tasks along with tons of unstructured time, they're in bigger lectures, they're not interacting with teachers. Like it is very different from high school. And it's very different in the way that it puts demands on students to figure out how can I be successful. Not to mention, it says fewer parent interactions here. Um, if your students go to UW-Madison, for most students, that means their parents probably didn't have to hover all over them in high school. The kids were probably pretty successful on their own. But even small things like, hey, how was your day? What do you have to do tonight? Any tests, like any small questions that parents even ask in passing, I think even make a difference in high school. So, they're at a big campus, they're in a city, they're running the show. Um, So here's how we see students struggle, and I think these are especially, any big school, definitely Madison qualifies there. Stuck in high school mode. You're going to hear me reference that a few times here, I think, on this webinar. Um, High school mode is when students um, they just kind of operate in the way that a high school student does. A lot of times that means the habits are okay, but not good. Oh, I have a calculus test Thursday. I'll just look at some things real quick Wednesday night, or I have a paper due Monday. I'll just write it Sunday night. That sort of mode of operating we have found when students kind of think they're going to go through college that way, it doesn't really work. And a lot of times when that becomes evident, is when they have their first round of midterms, and let's say it's like October 10th. They're about 6 weeks into school, and all of a sudden, um, they are not prepared or they haven't been keeping up with those academic tasks. They didn't study for a week leading into the exam. They just did the night before. They thought they could do it that way. Um, Students need to shift out of high school mode and move into college mode. And they need to figure that out quickly. You're going to hear me talk about structured time versus unstructured time a few times here too. That's a big one, is when students really learn, well, now I have, 12, 15 unstructured hours each day. How do I manage that time? How do I create structure? How do I have the organization? And how am I able to kind of jump into that college mode? Certainly at UW, overextending yourself socially is certainly an option. You get to college, you have all the freedom in the world, and there's something going on pretty much every night of the week. It's easy to be swept up in that. Um, Not connecting with others. So I should say, like, number one and number five are probably the two most common things that we see with students at UW. As big of a campus as UW is, and as much opportunity there is in all these different buckets, academic and sports and social, it actually can also be sometimes more difficult than a small school to just meet people because it's so big and there's these little bubbles, my dorm, or maybe my major, or maybe, a club, that if students don't find their little bubbles, um, it can be hard to get into a bubble later in the year. And then ultimately what the outcome of that is they just kind of start to withdraw. They stay, maybe they're isolated in their room, or they're just going to class and coming back to their dorm and not really having any interaction. We've definitely seen that happen. And it's tough, and it's not good for any human being's overall well-being. So that can definitely be a struggle. And then if other things pop up, mono, um, anxiety, mental health issues, some big thing, I don't know, their first major breakup, their, something else, hopefully horrible doesn't happen, but, something with a family member, whatever. And then of course there's like pledging, which, um, I will talk, about pledging a little bit more here. That really only pertains to the guys. The girls pledging is not really an issue. But these are some of the things. So as your students going through the fall, I think just to kind of keep a couple of these in mind of like, oh, is he overextending himself socially? What's he telling me on the phone that, whenever we talk? Or um if he does tell me about school, like, is he telling me how he's doing on his exams, like, or how he's prepping for them? I think those are good things to be talking to your student about when school comes up. This is what we all want. I think if I asked most students or most parents, like, they would want all of these things for their student, right? To find balance, to get good grades, to make friends and meet others, be involved, like, be able to manage their stress. Number seven, learn how to do college. Sometimes I say it like that because it's just easy. But um, number three, create a new baseline. What I mean by that is create a new baseline for what a week looks like. What are all the things that I need to do to be successful in a given week? Um, and how do I do those things? What is my new way of operating? What are all the things that need to happen across 7 days? And how am I able to make that my new normal? And a lot of that is kind of what I talked about earlier, like getting out of high school mode, getting into college mode. It's really important at big campuses, um, because there's just a lot going on. And, you know, as many people are that are around, I find, especially with guys more than girls, that they tend to take school on kind of by themselves. They don't, there's not often like, oh, study dates or meeting friends at the library or this and that. I think that's a little more common with the female students we work with, whereas with the guys, like, they're very isolated in the way they go about it, and it can be a little even more challenging for, I think, creating that new baseline when you don't really see or observe or talk to other people about what they're doing. All right. We're zipping right through here. The first 6 weeks, I can't talk about this topic at UW without stressing how important the first 6 weeks are. I just think it is crucial to getting off to a good start. It is crucial to um, keeping their stress down. It is so important, honestly, just to set up like the next 4 years of like, I'm understanding college, I'm getting into it. I'm certainly meeting people is an important piece of it. And with the students we work with students usually for a semester at a time. So we have a lot of first semester freshmen that come and work with us and have an executive function coach they meet with on a weekly basis. We're incredibly focused on this first 6 weeks, especially that first round of midterms and having students understand you're not in high school anymore. This is the amount of prep that goes into this. This is the weekly strategies you need to be using, the way you need to be communicating with professors and TAs. Um, Pledging is a big one at UW because Greek life is so big. We've worked with a lot of guys that, I should say rushing and pledging because first it starts with rushing, where you're usually going around and going out a lot and going to a lot of events. Then you start pledging. I think the biggest challenge with pledging, and I do not want this to sound like I am not like I'm against fraternities because I'm not. I think it's great. But the challenge that goes with pledging is almost like the real time spontaneity of it. It kind of makes me chuckle sometimes. But when I was pledging a fraternity 20 plus years ago, um, the only way they could get a hold of you was if they called your phone, or if they really didn't have your phone number, or they would like send out an email, and the only way you could read your email was if you were in front of a computer actually connected to Wi-Fi somewhere on campus, which there weren't a lot of places that had Wi-Fi on campus at the time. Like it was just really hard to communicate. Whereas today, the challenge of pledging is every pledge is just on a huge group chat, and it's like, hey, active sends out a message. I need Jimmy John's in my room in 10 minutes, and someone has to get on it, or I need three guys to, change a tire on my car. Whatever example I can give, but that is the challenge with pledging. Is it can be pretty disruptive, and of course it's time consuming. Now that being said, it's short. It's 8 weeks, 12, 10 weeks at different fraternities, but um, it is definitely something that students have to learn how to manage around and certainly like compensate for, and definitely find pockets where they can be uninterrupted and get a lot of work done and not be at the library and then have to go run off and do something, and it sort of just like creates this fracture in their work time. And the other thing is, of course, meeting all professors and TAs. I think that's pretty cliche, but most students don't do that. If students don't do it in the first couple weeks, I think, a week or so before the 2 weeks before the first midterm is a great way to introduce themselves and just go in and say, hey, this is my first set of midterms in college. I'm really nervous. Like, I really want to make sure I focus on the right things. Like, what can I study? I think that's a great way to do it. Usually TAs or professors will kind of feed you the content you need to be prioritizing, and it's a good way to introduce yourself. So, um, making sure you're doing that, especially at a big school like UW, where there's probably a lot of classes where, especially as freshmen, students won't even meet their professor. It'll be a massive lecture, but they'll have a TA, and they need to be um, definitely on a face-to-face, first name basis with the TAs. Um, okay, a couple more things here. Um, this ties into the we got to move out of high school mode. These are kind of some of the most important things. Number four has the asterisk around it. So, um, creating a new baseline. These are the things that go into it. Having systems, systematizing everything so the week can become as repetitive as possible. Um, so that when curveballs and different things come up, like students are in a good place. If a friend texts them and it's really nice weather and they're like, hey, let's go pick up basketball outside, they're able to do that. Like, we want students to be able to do that. When you think about Greek life and all the different events, there's going to be 7 home games. I actually think there might be 6 this year, but usually most years there's 7. That's a lot of Saturdays that students aren't going to be doing anything. Maybe even that leads into Sunday. Students need to be number 7, planning ahead, working ahead. They need to start to create their process for how do I prepare for a test or a paper? Like, when do I need to get started? How much time does it take? Who are sort of what are my outlets for getting more help? campus resources, which I'll touch on in a second here. How am I managing my time, that unstructured time? How am I making that work for me? And how am I making it so I can get started on my work in a timely manner and be productive while I'm doing it? So, I think a lot of times when students go through high school, they they don't have to think about much. It's like, hey, I got to get to school by 8, and then after school I have practice till 5:30, and then I go home and my parents make me dinner, and then I just have a couple hours to do homework, and then I'll relax. And that's kind of how every day goes. There's just not a lot of thought that goes into it because it's just sort of all embedded within their day. Not to mention the good things that come from even like, hey, I have baseball practice every day. It's like, okay, you're socializing, you're working out, you're like doing all these good things for you. And I think a lot of those things, when you go to a smaller school, they do continue in some way. You do have that communication with your with all your professors because your classes are 15 to 20 people. Um, you do sort of have a little bit more of a structure and people looking out for you. There's usually an advisor who actually knows who you are and talks to you more than like once a semester. Um, and at UW, you're flying solo. So you really need to start to put some thought into what are these systems that I'm going to have that are going to keep me on track while I'm at this big school. Um, okay. Last skill here, and then I'm going to get into some very specific Madison things. Um, so initiation. Um, Getting started on work, we find is one of the things that can take a student down. They procrastinate, they avoid, they get stressed out, whatever it is. We do think for the students that this is going to be tough for, that they really need to start thinking like, how can I get to those academic tasks? How am I going to be able to do the work that doesn't even relate to a submission or for points, right? How am I going to read chapter 3 of my textbook and take notes? Um, and so, um, part of it is managing their time, but then part of it is how do I create a structure? We call it the initiation infrastructure, but like, how do I put thought into what it takes for me to get started? Ideal environments on campus. We encourage students at UW to have 3 spots that are like work only spots. It might be this library or that library or this Starbucks or this other coffee place, like whatever it is. Um, we want them to have their 3 go-to spots as a freshman. They got to get out of their dorm. It's that simple. Like, we do not find that freshmen are successful getting work done in their dorms. If I highlighted a couple dorms, which I could, Witty, Celery, a couple others, like if you're in one of those dorms, it's just pretty unlikely that you're getting something done while you're in your dorm. Um, and there's a lot of spaces on campus, obviously, because it's a massive school. There's, I don't know, like 25 libraries. There's a bunch of other spaces. There's empty classrooms and buildings. Um, Students need to really move out of their dorm and get to a space where they can get work done. Um, as well as like incorporating other people. I mentioned this earlier of how girls are better at that than guys. It is very helpful, right? There's a reason, people have lifting buddies and workout partners and things like that. Like when students are able to find a person or two that they can just set something up with and just meet, and then they both do their individual work, we find that it's really good for those students that are going to struggle at getting started and they're stuck in their room or they're, doom scrolling or whatever the distractions that they have. Um, you got to put more thought into that at a big campus for sure. Okay. Going into UW, it's really important to identify like where do I think that my kid is gonna maybe struggle, right? Um, I've kind of touched on the social aspect of the start of freshman year here. It's obviously really important. Like I have seen students that have gone through college at UW or other big state schools where they just kind of don't find their group, don't find their people, and it's pretty lonely and stressful and takes a toll on their mental health. Um, if there are areas where a student is going to struggle, I think it's really important for the parent that summer going in to kind of just like give them some nudges, give them some help, Or if you're really worried, then kind of have some conversations about some options, right? Certainly Greek life, like I have worked with students who really struggle socially in high school. It's hard for them to approach people. Maybe they have a little bit of anxiety around socializing. Greek life is a really good way to wash that all away. Like you kind of just are given friends and you're in a group and you don't have to do the work to get there. I mean, you do have to rush and you have to get a bid and all that. But once you're in a fraternity or a sorority, it's just there. I have seen it wash away a lot of social anxiety for students because they're just plopped into it. And the same goes for these other options. So FIGs are first year interest groups. Um, you apply like at SOAR or after you do your SOAR stuff. So this is coming up kind of right now, but a first year interest group, you're sort of like put in a group of 25, 30 people, and it's based around interests. And you have a couple classes together. You have like a Monday night seminar, Tuesday night seminar, and you kind of have like a community with these people that you see for multiple classes and have in-depth conversations and do icebreakers. And there might even be a couple social events. So first year interest groups, they're the topics when you choose a topic and you take the 2 to 3 classes, it's usually they kind of cover, you can pick one in anything. They have, I mean, they'll have, I think there's 68 of them or 70 of them, but you can pick a topic of law or pop culture or political science or all these different history or multicultural type categories. Like there is a lot of them. And so you could definitely put a student in that if you feel like, oh, they have this interest, this very niche interest, and there's a fig for that, or they're interested in this. We'll put them in that. And now they're with 25 to 30 people who are like also chose to do this thing and are interested in that. And odds are is they're pretty like-minded people who will get along. So figs is a good way to sort of embed it into a student's freshman year or residential learning communities, or they'll call them RLCs, which is that's how to find it. It's in the housing app of a student's portal. But again, there's like 12 of these, and these you actually live in a dorm with people, and you have some classes and some seminars and different things embedded. So they have a bunch of, they have like the bio house is a pretty big one. There's a like entrepreneurial one. I think it's called Startup. There's one called the Studio, which is more artistic and creative. Um, but you're kind of similar to how I talked about like joining a house. It's sort of embedded, it's thrust upon you and you're plopped into it, and you have to do less work with the socializing, which I think is really important for a lot of students, where it's going to be really hard to go sit down in a class and initiate a conversation and sort of create a friendship or find another avenue to do that. So I do think if that's a pain point, some of these things are great options for a student. I encourage all students to join a group. I'm not going to open the list right here. There's obviously a gajillion clubs. They'll have their like activity fair. Usually it's at the Cole Center, one of the first couple weeks of school. I think students should go through the list before they get on campus, though, and just target a couple things. What I find with these groups, it's another way to sort of embed yourself with like-minded people and make friends. What I find with these groups is that the longer students wait, the longer they wait. Like if it doesn't happen, it's not going to happen. So they really need to get on campus and do it right away and then start attending things. Because if it's October, like they're not jumping into a club. It's just not how I see it happen. They have to do it, has to happen. So a lot of times that takes a parent's push too, because maybe in the summer going into school, like kids aren't, they're not like, let me pull up the list. Most aren't at least like, let me pull up the list and look through which club I want to join. Um, those are good options, for sure. Um, it is so important for students to like mobilize and engage with campus. I think the last slide kind of touched on a lot of things. Getting to know the campus resources at UW has to happen because we do executive function coaching with students. Um, I mentioned we work with a lot of first semester freshmen. Well, we also work with a lot of first semester sophomores where freshman year didn't go well, and then they come and find us and they want to work with a coach. And one of the most common things I hear is they are not using the campus resources. Um, and man, are there a lot. So students really, I again, sometimes we do not sometimes we do a sort of transition to college workshop in the summers, one-on-one. And we sort of have students do this like campus scavenger hunt. They might do something like this at SOAR, but we just want them to be familiar with what are the things that are specific to them. There's different tutoring options here and here. There's learning centers. I mean, there is like a math learning center, a chem learning center, a bio learning center, a physics learning center, an engineering. Like the specific majors have their own learning centers. Even guts and Went Commons are more of like campus wide broad tutoring, but you can still get help in all the classes you need. Obviously, the writing center, McBurney, mental health resources. Um, on campus, if a student needs group therapy is always free. Usually, if you need individual counseling, they'll see a few times and then they'll kind of give you a referral list out in the community. I also definitely have a long list of counselors as well that I think are great in the community and work with college students. McBurney, obviously, if you're, that's the disability office for those who don't know. If your student is a student who's going to be working with them, maybe applying for some accommodations, or maybe they're already set up. It is important. A lot of students struggle to kind of engage in that process. McBurney usually does like an intake to determine if a student gets accommodations. It's usually a combo. It's sort of like two buckets. It's like, what's the paperwork, the IEP, the 504, the neuropsych report? What are you submitting? And then they do a student interview. I do think it's important for students to like write out responses to interview questions, but just it's good for parents to tell their students to think through what, if someone asks you, why do you need these accommodations, or how did these help you in high school, or what is your disability and how does it impact you? Like they need to be able to answer those questions about themselves, and a lot of times maybe they haven't before. So it is good when getting set up with McBurney, hopefully in the summer or right at the start of the school year. The students are just prepared to answer those questions. I already talked about joining groups. Got to get out of the dorm. Got to get moving, doing work in other places. Um, the things that we see impact students: exercise, sleep, diet. I was talking about how in their high school calendar, their high school day, it's all just kind of embedded for them, right? Like you make their food. They they're in sports or whatever, they're exercising. Like when all that goes away, it is on the student to kind of maintain these healthy habits. They're going to help them just holistically function better and be a better student. I always encourage people to get football tickets. There's only 7 Saturdays. They're not very expensive if you go through the student portal to get them. And it's a good way to meet people, or everyone on your floor is going. Like it's a good way to do something outside of the dorm with people. So even for those students who might not be interested, I'm usually like, just maybe just get them that first year at least and see how it goes. It's a good way to get out and do something. Um, so all of these things I think are more ways on top of the clubs, and possibly even joining some of those, like a fraternity or sorority, or the FIGs, the LRCs. There has to be sort of this like complete picture for students really to start connecting. Certainly, like a club within their major would be great. Um, so that's kind of what I feel are the important things. I think I kind of covered like, here's some, obviously we do executive function coaching. I wanted to cover like, here's some important things as students kind of transition into this really big campus with all these opportunities. Here's sort of the time frame that they should be able to kind of start doing these things, which is pretty quick. Like they need to make that adjustment. Um, and then here's some sort of ways to think about your student, think about where they may struggle, what might be tough for them, and see if there's anything that you can do just leading into them getting here that will set them up, that will sort of, again, like kind of embed, but just sort of like insert those things into their world where they don't have to work as hard at it. They don't have to deal with the internal stress or anxiety or all the things that come with, oh, now I need to make friends. Oh, now I need to, join a club or do something on campus. Like if there's thought and intention that goes into that prior to them getting on campus, I find those things are way more likely to happen. I find that adds to the student's college experience. just their overall happiness and the way that they engage on campus. So here's my contact. I know I mentioned a few things we do, summer workshops, we do coaching, things like that. If you're ever interested in just connecting with me or learning about anything, feel free to reach out. But I really appreciate you watching this webinar, and hopefully everyone got a few takeaways out of it that they can go kind of explore or talk to their student about. Thanks.